Good evening, hello and welcome. You're with the news today, your primetime destination news, newsmakers, talking points Tuesday night. The big debate has come from the Supreme Court tonight, where the battle for scrapping sedition law or not is reaching a critical phase. We'll have top jurists joining us on the show tonight. Also, is Khalistan-backed terror back to haunt Punjab? Punjab MP Manish Tiwari will be among my guests tonight, later on in the show. But first, as always, it's time for the 9 headlines at 9 tonight. Supreme Court asked the centre to clear its stand on the sedition law as the government says it wants to re-examine the law. But the court says, what happens to the cases that are already been filed? Will they be kept in abeyance? Deadline set for tomorrow by the apex court. Confusion over ex-Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa and family's whereabouts in Sri Lanka amidst reports that they could flee the island country. As violence intensifies, the government issues shoot-on-sight orders to quell riots. Khalistan linked to the attack on Punjab Police Intel headquarters is one of the possible reasons. Seek for Justice Chief Gurpatwant Singh Pannu issues an open threat warning of an attack in Himachal next. Rupee recovers from the all-time low of yesterday, gaining 14 paise against the US dollar to close at 77.32. Market expects it to depreciate further in the coming days. Hindu groups protest at Delhi's Qutub Minar for changing its name to Vishnu's Thumb. BJP demands roads of capital named after Mughal rulers to be changed. The loudspeaker Natak in Karnataka continues. Bomai government asks those using loudspeakers in public to seek permission within 15 days, sets up a panel to decide on applications. Singapore bans the film The Kashmir Files, citing one-sided portrayal of Muslims, says the movie has potential to cause enmity between communities. Shashi Tharoor, among others, backs the move. Andhra Pradesh, Odisha and West Bengal brace for heavy rainfall and wind due to cyclone Asani, which is expected to recurve now. NDRF teams deployed across coastline. Centre monitors situation. And Santur maestro Pandit Shiv Kumar Sharma passed away at the age of 84. Prime Minister Modi mourns the loss, says the cultural world is poorer with the genius's demise. But our top story tonight comes from the Supreme Court, which has asked the centre, the Modi government, to make its stand clear on the sedition law. A 3-judge bench headed by the Chief Justice NV Ramana asked the centre first to inform it about the pending cases under sedition law and how the government will take care of these cases. This on a day when the centre informed the apex court that the Modi government wanted to re-examine and reconsider the law. The court made it clear it was ready to do so, but set a deadline. Tell us what you're going to do with the existing laws by tomorrow morning. Anisha Mathur brings you this report on a day when the Supreme Court has made it clear that the sedition law has to receive a final order either way, either in Parliament or in the apex court.
A day after the Narendra Modi government said it is re-examining clauses of the sedition law, the Supreme Court has asked the government if cases under Section 124A can be kept in abeyance till that happens. The 3-judge bench of CJI NV Ramana, Justice Suryakant and Justice Hima Kohli has given the government time till Wednesday to clarify its stand. The court also agreed to give the government time to reconsider the sedition law, but it asked some pointed questions of the centre. The day saw spirited arguments by the government and petitioners who have challenged the sedition law. Here is how it unfolded after the court convened at 2 p.m. on Tuesday. As the court convened on Tuesday, Solicitor General Tushar Mehta urged the court to defer the hearing as the government at the executive level will reconsider the law. Kapil Sibal, appearing for the petitioners, opposed. He said The court can't stop its exercise just because the legislature will take 6 months or 1 year to re-examine the law. When the CJI asked how long will the reconsideration take, the SG did not give a time frame. He said, the process has started. Please see tenor and spirit of the affidavit. The CJI at one point said, we are taking into consideration that they are undertaking a serious exercise. It should not appear that we are unreasonable. Now, Mr. Mehta, there are concerns that this is being misused. The AG himself had said chanting Hanuman Chalisa is leading to such cases. The SG pointed fingers at the states. He said these filing of FIRs, etc. is by the state government. The first limb of 124A is to protect sovereignty and integrity of the nation. When there is misuse, there is constitutional remedies. Here, Justice Suryakant intervened. You complete this task in 3 months, 4 months, but till such period, why don't you direct the states that matters under 124A be kept in abeyance till the centre finishes the process of reconsideration? The SG replied, I can discuss with the government and there can be guidelines. While granting time, the CJI said, our special query is on pending cases under sedition law and how will government take care of these cases. The history of sedition law also came up for debate during the hearing.
While the centre is reconsidering the sedition law, the Solicitor General in his arguments has made it clear that the provision itself will stay as it is a question of India's integrity and sovereignty. The apex court has, however, asked certain pertinent questions. First of all, what kind of time is it likely to take the centre to conduct this reconsideration exercise? And secondly, what happens to those who have been booked and arrested or would be booked and arrested under this particular law while the centre is going through its reconsideration exercise? With cameraman Ashwini Helan in New Delhi, this is Anisha Mathur for India Today.
Let's raise tonight the big questions. Has the time come to simply scrap the sedition law as it stands today? Is the Modi government serious in re-examining Section 124A sedition law, or is the government simply trying to buy time? Who should decide whether the law should be watered down, stay as they are, or indeed scrapped? The judiciary or the legislature? Joining me now, Justice Pradeep Nandrajog, former Judge of the High Court. He was the Chief Justice of the Bombay High Court. Satyapal Jain, Additional Solicitor General of the country, is joining me. Dushyant Dave, Senior Advocate, Supreme Court, and Abhinav Chandrachud, Advocate, Bombay High Court. Appreciate all four of you joining us here on the news today. Let me first come to the judge who I spoke to earlier. Justice Nandrajog, do you believe that the time has come to scrap the sedition law as it is? Should the Supreme Court be doing it as of now, or should the decision be left to the political executive where the Modi government is suddenly saying they are ready to re-examine the law? Should the courts give the government this time?
Well, I will put it to you like this. If you look at jurisprudences abroad, and even in the most liberal democracy where freedom of expression and speech is protected is the United States of America, they also have a law relating to sedition. It's there in Canada, it's there in Europe, it's there in United Kingdoms. Therefore, my personal view would be that to scrap it, lock, stock and barrel may be difficult, irrespective of, we may say, whether this is the right time or some other time is the right time. I think, going by the international trends, it would be difficult to scrap it altogether. But the problem is the wording of Section 124A as we find its reflection in the penal code.
But may I point out, Justice Nandrajog, the fact is even the United Kingdom abolished sedition law in 2009. The country which in a sense brought this colonial law into this country, which was used against the likes of Mahatma Gandhi dating back to the 19th century, is when this law was brought into our statute books. Should India be retaining it in the manner that we have? It gives such wide discretion today to police officers to charge someone with sedition.
If you see the scrapping of the sedition law abroad has a linkage with the law of treason, which is retained. So whether you expand the scope of treason, if you would see that sedition as a crime is nearly allied to treason and frequently precedes treason. So in that context, my view is that the problem in India lies with the three explanations to 124A and the judgment of the Supreme Court in Kedarnath, where they brought in the concept of that if what you say amounts to bringing or attempting to bring in public order issues, that became a very wide interpretation to the concept of sedition. So if we were to take corrective action and reinterpret the three explanations, then I think it should suffice.
So you're effectively calling in some way for a watering down of the law, not for scrapping it. Let me widen this, and Dushyant, the way you take this, because let's look at the news point from today. Today, before the Supreme Court, the Government Counsel, Tushar Mehta, Solicitor General, says, we are ready to re-examine, reconsider the law. Please defer the hearings. Now, the same government on Saturday had said that the sedition law was absolutely necessary. Suddenly, 2 days later, a day before the hearing on Tuesday, they changed their mind. Therefore, do you believe that the court should now give the Modi government, as they appeared to do today in court, the time to re-examine the law? Or do you believe the Modi government is simply buying time because to save itself from the embarrassment of Chief Justice Ramana deciding maybe tomorrow to scrap the law?
Well, it's not so easy, and the answer to your question is also extremely difficult. I think Supreme Court will have to perhaps refer the matter to the larger bench of 7 justices if it really wants to scrap the law, declare it to be unconstitutional, because Kedarnath was a judgment of 5 learned judges of the Supreme Court. Having said that, I would say that, look, government perhaps may want to genuinely consider, because, see, fortunately for the country and fortunately for the government is advised by Mr. K.K. Venugopal, the Attorney General of India, who is an extremely sober and very respected lawyer, and he's extremely sound about these issues. In fact, he did flag, in the hearing earlier, that the law requires perhaps a lot of tuning down, and to provide some kind of safeguards so that the law is not abused. I think that was perhaps the beginning of rethinking on the part of the government. But having said so, I mean, I won't be surprised. It's very difficult to speculate what really went into the mind of the government over the weekend. But it is possible government may be wanting to buy some time, because as I understand this government, I don't think this government is really going to accept removal of sedition law altogether, because this government wants to, I think, have it and use it as indiscriminately as it has in last so many years. And many innocent people have been really charged with sedition law. So I don't know. I'm not sure what really is in the mind of the government. But if it is seriously considering to reconsider, it's a welcome step. And
should a deadline be given? Mr. Dave, should the courts give a deadline and tell the government, look, this cannot be an open-ended reconsideration. You can't, because remember, Justice Ramana retires towards the end of August. Should the Supreme Court say, look, in the next 3 months, by first week of August, come back to us and tell us what you're doing. If you don't come back to us, we will presume that you're not serious.
Well, if I were the Supreme Court, I would give them 3 days. If
3
they
days.
Can bring farm laws in no time and scrap them in no time. This is the government which, treats parliament like it's some kind of a, club. And therefore, it passes any kind of law that it wants to and scraps the laws that it wants to. So if government is serious, then government can scrap the law within 24 hours. Or they can even convene a special session of parliament if parliament is not in session. So 3 months is too long a period, according to me. I think government, Supreme Court should not give that kind of a time. Okay. And they should really ask the government what exactly they want. Are they seriously considering to really remove the section altogether, or to provide safeguards, as the learned Attorney General had said. So I think the Supreme Court perhaps would be well within its right to say that we will not give, that kind of a long time to this government, looking to its history and looking to how Parliament functions under this government.
Let me turn that to Satyapal Jain, because you've heard Dushyant Dave, who seems to believe that the government is trying to buy time. He still is not sure of the government's intention. The reason, Satyapal Jain, for the skepticism about the government on sedition law, the figures. According to the NCRB, the National Crime Records Bureau, between 2016 and 19, number of cases filed under Section 124A sedition increased by 160%. Rate of conviction dropped to 3.3%. Out of 96 persons arrested in 2019, only 2 were convicted. 13,306 people have been booked in 867 sedition cases between 2010 and 2020. On one hand, the government says we want to re-examine the law. We believe this is a colonial law. Mr. Modi believes that this is 75 years of independence. We should not have a colonial law. But the police is going across the country imposing sedition on all kinds of people, from a teenage environmental activist like Disha Ravi to journalists. The sedition law to even Navneet Rana for Hanuman Chalisa. So what does the government want? Is it serious or not?
See, there are 3 small questions in a big question that you have put to me. Number 1, about the validity of the act. Number 2, intentions of the government. Number 3, certain cases where there is an allegation that it has been misused. So far as the intention of the government is concerned, I think there is no reason to doubt the intention of the government. The government has shown its magnanimity. And in view of all that instances which have been cited, all those things which have been said, the government of India, led by Shri Narendra Modi ji, has very fairly said that we are ready to re-examine it.
No, please reconcile, sir, sorry to interrupt. Please reconcile what you have just said with the figures I have put out. You are saying Mr. Modi's government is serious about re-examining sedition law, but the police across the country, many of them BJP-ruled states, is going ahead filing sedition case after sedition case.
I said there are 3 sub-questions put by you, one about the intention of law and the misuse.
Yes.
I am first replying to that. There is no reason to doubt the intention of Modi government.
Okay.
He has very fairly said we will examine it, and after examination it will come back to the Supreme Court. Whether it is 3 months, 4 months, that will be ultimately decided by the Supreme Court tomorrow. So far as the validity of the part, this active clause is concerned, it's not something which has been enacted by Modi government. This law was enacted in 1860, 1870, and not that its validity is being challenged for the first time. Let's not forget, a 5 judges bench of the Honorable Supreme Court, which is being doubted by the 3 judges bench, upheld the validity of this law, though as the Honorable Judge pointed out, it modified and said only the activities involving incitement to violence or intention or tendency to create public disorder or cause disturbance of public peace will amount to sedition. This was somewhere in 1962.
That's 62, so sir. That is 60 years ago. 60 years ago, Kedarnath versus State of Bihar is 60 years ago, sir.
Yes, that is what I am saying. I am saying the same thing. For 60 years, there has been no serious challenge to the judgment. It's for the first time now, during this period, because of certain cases where the allegation is that it is being used by the state government, state police.
Yes.
For
Misused.
Being abused. That is a simple thing.
Yes.
I am saying that this issue, so far as the abused part is concerned, as a lawyer, and my friends will agree, I don't think any law in the country about which there is no allegation that it has been misused. Mrs. Gandhi misused Article 356 for dismissing very government number of times. The emergency was a misuse. There are a number of misuse of cases involving people in murder, NCRT, everywhere. So
You have condemned Mrs. Gandhi's government.
Mr. Dave, let him complete. No, Mr. Dave, let him complete. Mr. Dave, you must let him complete.
So that there is no scope of any abuse.
Okay, so you're saying the mere fact that the law is being misused is not reason enough to scrap the law. Am I correct, Mr. Jain?
Yes, and if you do that, you may have to scrap almost all the laws.
Okay, this is an additional Solicitor General saying that if you look at misuse of the law, you'll have to scrap all laws. Dhananjay, Dr. Abhinav Chandrachud, you wrote a book, Republic of Rhetoric, Free Speech and the Constitution of India. In the Kedarnath versus State of Bihar case, which Satyapal Jain just cited, 1962, court said a citizen has a right to say or write whatever he likes about the government, or he or criticize or comment so long as he does not incite people to violence against the government established by law or with the intention of creating public disorder. Now, the worry is this is very widely interpreted. Do you believe that the real challenge is to frame guidelines for courts and in particular for the police? Or do you believe that the law itself, as the United Kingdom has done, needs to be junked?
So more than guidelines, I think this is a golden opportunity for the government to bring about some reform in the law, even if the government does not want to scrap the law altogether. And I can think of at least 3 things that the government can do if it doesn't want to scrap the law of sedition, which is really to bring the law in line with the law of sedition as it was in England in 1832 and from 1832 onwards. In other words, 190 years ago in England, sedition was considered a misdemeanor and not a felony. That meant that sedition was a bailable offense. In other words, if you were accused of the offense of sedition, you were entitled to be released on bail as a matter of right. The British, of course, made it a non-bailable offense in India for obvious reasons. There's no reason why we need to continue with this colonial hangover. The second point is that since 1832 in England, sedition was what we would now call a non-cognizable offense. In other words, if the police want to investigate the crime of sedition, they require a warrant from a magistrate. They can't arrest somebody without obtaining a warrant from a magistrate. Now, surprisingly, the British in colonial India made sedition a non-cognizable offense. We in independent India in 1974, when the new criminal procedure code came into being, made it a cognizable offense for the first time in India's history. So this is a self-inflicted wound. It's a self-goal. And this is something that we should do away with. And thirdly, sedition since 1832 in England being a misdemeanor was punishable with only 2 years in prison. But the British made it punishable in India with life imprisonment. It continues to be punishable with life imprisonment in India. So there's no reason why these 3 reforms cannot be enacted. Of course, if the government wants to carry out a more serious exercise to determine whether the law of sedition should be scrapped altogether, there are 2 things that the government needs to look at. First and foremost, the government must realize that there are a negligible number of sedition cases being registered on a year-on-year basis. So if you look at the past 5 years, the National Crime Records Bureau will tell you that sedition cases constitute 0.8% of the offenses against the state that are registered each year. In 2020, for example, there were 73 sedition cases as against over 5,000 cases of offenses against the state, over 1,000 murder cases, over 2,000 theft cases. And the conviction rate, as you rightly said, Rajdeep, in sedition cases is very low. The average conviction rate is 20% in the past 5 years. In 2019, as you rightly pointed out, it was 3%. But it has a chilling effect on free speech, on journalism, and so on. Okay. So what the government, if I can really just end by saying this, what the government needs to do is, in the past 5 years, it needs to examine the 20% cases where a conviction was obtained for sedition. And the government needs to examine that was sedition really necessary in order to secure a conviction? Or could the accused have been convicted, and was the accused convicted of other offenses, for example, waging war against the state and so on? Right. If so, then really sedition has been reduced to a dead letter in India as it was in England since 1832. Of course, as you rightly pointed out, in 2009, sedition was scrapped in England.
So, in a way, what you are also suggesting that you need to create safeguards. And therefore, Dushyant Dave, let's come from what, a wonderful history of the law has been given to us just now by Dr. Abhinav Chandrachud. You've got Satyapal Jain saying, look, misuse of the law cannot be reason enough to scrap the law. However, the fact is that we've reached a stage where if we look at misuse of the law as reason to scrap, you'll scrap a lot of other laws. Why, in your view, should sedition specifically be looked at as a law that the Supreme Court now needs to enact? Is it because all governments have used sedition to in a way settle political scores, as we just saw in Maharashtra, or we've seen in fact in other states as well in the past? With Disha Ravi, for example, the centre wanted to send a chilling message perhaps to young environmental activists.
Well, I don't know whether, the offense of sedition really takes place in this country any longer. I mean, yes, you can talk about certain Maoist organizations which may indulge in certain seditious activities. But besides that, the kind of cases which are being registered against citizens across the country are not at all anywhere near the definition of sedition. They are completely normal cases in which the police goes and trigger-happy police just, slaps because the political parties want it. See, the police in this country today is working at the diktat of the political party in power. And they know, they take the cue. So when they realize that a particular journalist has said something against the chief minister of the state, including, West Bengal, they simply put the charge of sedition against the journalist. So the thing has become extraordinary. The problem is, it's not just that the section stands on the statute book. It's not just that the police is abusing it. The real problem is that when this accused is brought first time before the magistrate, he should simply look at the charge and say, scrap this on the first day.
So are you saying that, so just a minute, are you saying that, sir, Mr. Dave, as long as the law remains on the statute books, the police will be prone to misuse it? Therefore, rather than have the law, there are enough, if there is someone creating disaffection, so-called disaffection of public order, there's enough within the existing IPC without needing sedition laws.
Absolutely. And the problem is that the judiciary does not save the citizens. The real challenge is that the reason why it should be scrapped is that judiciary has it just turns the other way. If the judiciary were to say in all these cases, which the figures that you gave, with a conviction rate of 3%, what prevented the judge on the first day to say that this is not a seditious case? Because Kedarnath says that sedition must be followed by violence, not just likelihood of violence, actual violence. In all these cases, there is no violence. So what is the point of, charging citizens with sedition, judiciary looking the other way and allowing people to be arrested and spend a lot of time in jail? You are doing something which is extraordinarily wrong against the fundamental rights of citizens. So this section naturally needs to be removed so long as it remains on the statute book. Abuse in this country is not going to be impossible to prevent, and protection by judiciary is not easy to come around.
You want to reply to that, Satyapal Jain? There is a sense that the time has come. 75 years after independence, if a law which even the British, which brought it in to this country, have removed, we have tightened it. We've made it non-bailable in this country at times.
See, so far as the law being 70 years old is concerned, I remember once Justice M.M. Punchi pointed out in the court that law is not like the hot jalebis, that the latest is more important and the older is not that important. Law is law, maybe 70 years, maybe 100 years, maybe 200 years. So far as Mr. Dushyant Dave's points are concerned, I think indirectly he agrees with my suggestion that let there be sufficient safeguards. Let the Honorable Judge examine on the first date of hearing itself whether any prima facie case is made out or not. Let the judiciary examine the whole case objectively without any further delay. Unfortunately, there is a very simple principle of criminal jurisprudence. But if there is a doubt on you, you will be booked. And if there is a doubt, that is sufficient for your acquittal. So on doubt, you will be booked. On doubt, you will be acquitted. But that is the law of the land. So what I am suggesting is this. Now the government has come out with a proposal that it will re-examine the issue. Let all concerned give their suggestions to the government, so that the government examines all the pros and cons of this issue.
And what happens to Mr. Jain, while the government re-examines, and in this country we know what re-examination means, what happens to existing cases? I've got a sedition case against me. There are many others who have. What happens to our cases?
See,
please tell me. Are they to be kept in abeyance or not?
That is the question which has been put up by the honorable judges of the
I am asking you.
The government today. And government will be responding to that tomorrow morning.
No, what is your view?
One thing more. Even if the Supreme Court wants to re-examine it and overrule this judgment, Kedar Singh's case, it is a 5-judge judgment. They will have to constitute a bench of 7 judges. Up to middle of July, the Supreme Court is closed. I think Supreme Court itself may not be able to decide it by the end of this year. In the normal course. Therefore, let the government come out with its proposals. What are the suggestions that are received by the government and what are the suggestions that are accepted by the government? That, I think, to my mind, will be more reasonable and time-saving.
I think if the government is serious, Rajdeep, government as a gesture of goodwill should immediately say that all cases pending against the persons, except where violence has been incited, actual violence, stand withdrawn. And then government should debate about it.
Let me take that to Justice Nandrajog, who, as I said, I spoke to earlier. The government says today to the Supreme Court, Justice Nandrajog, give us some time to reconsider and re-examine the law. But while this law is being re-examined and reconsidered, what should happen to existing sedition law cases? What happens to future cases that might be filed? Someone may be arrested tomorrow for sedition while the government is re-examining the law. So should the entire statute be held in abeyance while the government re-examines and reconsiders it or not, sir?
Yes, I think at least bail should be granted because it's an admission by the government of the day that as interpreted by the executive, probably the law needs some correction, if not a complete scrapping. So that itself should lead the court to be liberal in granting bails. The problem is actually lying in the courts where they are not really reading. Even Kedarnath, even in its widest sweep, doesn't go as wide that any dissatisfaction with the policy of the government would be sedition. Even Kedarnath says that the expression of dissatisfaction should reach the level of creating public order issues.
Dr. Chandrachud, in conclusion, do you also believe that while the government decides to re-examine these cases, the statute should be held in abeyance? We've had tribal activists in Jharkhand against whom hundreds have had sedition cases filed against them. Many of them have spent months in jail. Do you believe the time has come for this country to look at this? At least if the Modi government is serious about it, then the first seriousness of its intent should be we are staying across the country. Can they do that? Across the country, tell state governments that look, no more sedition cases and existing sedition cases are being held in abeyance?
So Rajdeep, the question that you have asked poses a very interesting separation of powers dilemma. Because the question that arises in my mind, I'm not sure I know the answer, is that can the center, of course, law and order being a state subject, can the center issue directions to the states not to pursue prosecutions? And what are the implications? Can the center do so in some corruption case in some state? It will have some far-reaching implications if the central government can issue directions to the state government to go easy on some prosecutions. That having been said, of course, I just wanted to say that Gandhi had always called sedition the sword of Damocles hanging over the necks of Indian patriots, and today it's the sword of Damocles hanging around the necks of journalists. It's no coincidence that the British did not introduce sedition into the Indian Penal Code in 1860, because at that time the Indian Penal Code was supposed to be a model penal code for England, and England didn't have the offence of sedition. It was inserted in 1870 once they decided that, well, this needs to be brought more in lines with what we need to do in India, and amended in 1898. So let's go back to 1860 and let's make it a model penal code. And let's go back to the time in 1832 in England and try and at least reform the law, if not scrap the law entirely.
All I can say is touche. Let's hope that the words that you've just spelled out are words that are heard and echoed tomorrow in the courts of this country. It's time to relook at this law, and it's time for the government of the day to make sure that its intent is actually backed by action on the ground. Its bona fides are on test, and we'll see what happens in the court tomorrow. Thank you all very much for joining me here on my top talking point tonight. Let's turn to my second talking point, because Punjab is a state which right through the 1980s was associated with terror. India fought back and terror was defeated. But yesterday there was a chilling reminder of what could happen, because the state is on high alert after a rocket-propelled grenade was launched into the Intel police headquarters last night in Mohali near Chandigarh. The Punjab Chief Minister Bhagwant Mann has said that the attack in Mohali is an attempt to spoil the atmosphere in the state of Punjab. Meanwhile, groups who claim to have links to Khalistan separatist groups are claiming responsibility for the attack. The opposition is targeting now the new Punjab Chief Minister Bhagwant Mann. Here's our other report.
An explosion that shook the intelligence office of the Punjab police. And with it brought the state's Aam Aadmi Party government under heavy political fire. As investigators probe the RPG-propelled grenade hit that caused no human injury in Mohali, Punjab's ruling Aam Aadmi Party confronts opposition onslaught. Chief Minister Bhagwant Mann is already being blamed for subservience to his party leader Arvind Kejriwal, a charge he stoutly denies. The Mohali blast delivered fresh ammunition to Congress to target the Mann government.
जब से आम आदमी पार्टी की पंजाब में सरकार रही है, कत्ल के केसेस में वृद्धि, पटियाला में दंगे, तरन तारण में आरडीएक्स का मिलना और अब पुलिस के ही दफ्तर पे हमला हो जाना, ये बात दर्शाता है कि आम आदमी पार्टी केजरीवाल की जो पंजाब में सरकार है, पंजाब की सुरक्षा, अमन चैन के लिए हानिकारक है। अब माननीय भगवंत मान जी को जाग जाना चाहिए, उन्हें याद रखना चाहिए वो पंजाब के मुख्यमंत्री हैं, केवल केजरीवाल के प्रचार मंत्री नहीं हैं। देश के गृह मंत्री श्री अमित शाह जी से दरखास्त करूंगा कि सेंट्रल जांच एजेंसियों को जिम्मेदारी दी जाए मोहाली मामले की तह तक जाने के लिए, उसकी जांच करने के लिए।
The BJP took a tongue-in-cheek stance on Bhagwant Mann and Arvind Kejriwal.
ये कह देना कि ये माइनर है, भाई रॉकेट प्रोपेलर से एक ग्रेनेड फेंका जाता है, यार इसको माइनर अटैक और मेजर अटैक आप इसको कैसे कहेंगे? इससे बड़ा तो मुझे नहीं सकता कि अटैक हो सकता हो, और पंजाब में कभी हुआ भी नहीं इस तरह का। हम भगवंत मान जी के सपोर्ट में हैं, हम चाहते हैं कि वो इस लड़ाई को लड़ें, लेकिन वो केजरीवाल जी को छोड़ें। केजरीवाल जी की डिफरेंट प्रायोरिटीज़ हैं। केजरीवाल जी की प्रायोरिटी पंजाब की नहीं है, केजरीवाल जी की प्रायोरिटी सिख नहीं है।
Akali Chief Sukhbir Singh Badal warned the Aam Aadmi Party government not to use the Mohali explosion as a pretext to start witch hunt of Sikh youth. The ruling Aam Aadmi Party has fielded its own army in defence. The Chief Minister guaranteed swift action and prosecution.
कल रात जो मोहाली ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਘਟਨਾ ਹੋਈ ਹੈ, ਮੈਂ ਡੀਜੀਪੀ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਨਾਲ ਸਾਰੇ ਇੰਟੈਲੀਜੈਂਸ ਦੇ ਅਫਸਰਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਮੀਟਿੰਗ ਲਈ ਹੈ ਔਰ ਸਾਰਾ ਡਿਟੇਲ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਨਿਕਲ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ ਔਰ ਗ੍ਰਿਫਤਾਰੀਆਂ ਕੁਝ ਹੋ ਵੀ ਗਈਆਂ, ਕੁਝ ਹੋ ਜਾਣਗੀਆਂ ਤੇ ਜੜਾਂ ਤੱਕ ਪਹੁੰਚ ਜਾਾਂਗੇ। ਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਇਹੀ ਬਾਰ-ਬਾਰ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦਾ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਜਰੀਏ ਕਿ ਜਿਹਨੇ ਵੀ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦਾ ਮਾਹੌਲ ਖਰਾਬ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਕੀਤੀ ਉਹ ਬਖਸ਼ਿਆ ਨਹੀਂ ਜਾਊਗਾ, ਸਖਤ ਤੋਂ ਸਖਤ ਸਜ਼ਾ ਮਿਲੂਗੀ।
His party brass called the Mohali explosion an attempt to incite hatred in Punjab.
पंजाब में मोहाली ब्लास्ट नफरत फैलाने की और डर फैलाने की एक कोशिश है। आम आदमी पार्टी की सरकार, भगवंत मान जी की सरकार पंजाब का अमन चैन कायम करने के लिए पूरी तरीके से प्रतिबद्ध है, और जो भी पंजाब का अमन चैन और शांति बिगाड़ने की कोशिश करेगा, शांति भंग करने की कोशिश करेगा, उसकी जगह जेल के सीखों के पीछे है।
Less than 2 months in office, the Aam Aadmi Party's first government in Punjab takes another test by fire over the Mohali blast after the Patiala clashes late last month. Bureau Report, India Today.
And joining me now is Congress senior MP from Punjab, Manish Tiwari. Mohali comes under his constituency of Anandpur Sahib, and importantly also Manish Tiwari tragically lost his father to a killing by Khalistani terrorists in the 1980s. Manish Tiwari, when you then read today about this attack in Mohali, where an intelligence headquarters of the Punjab police is targeted with a rocket-propelled grenade, what was your first thought? Did you sense the return of some kind of a more technology-driven terrorism, a much more dangerous form possibly targeting the Punjab police?
Well, Rajdeep, Mohali is a part of my parliamentary constituency. And at that particular point in time, we were just 2 kilometers from where this unfortunate and dastardly attack took place. I was condoling the death of a senior Congress colleague of mine. But yes, you're absolutely correct. What has happened is extremely worrisome. The choice of the weaponry which has been used, a rocket-propelled grenade, this obviously means that there is some surplus capacity which seems to have been freed up in Afghanistan, which is now finding its way to Jammu and Kashmir and Punjab. So therefore, in many senses of the word, this could in fact be an inflection point, because let's also not forget that for the last almost 3 years, I think 2018, 2019 onwards, There have been repeated drone intrusions from across the border, drones carrying weaponry, narcotics, grenades, small armaments, AK-47s, AK-56s. And for every one drone which may have been interdicted by the Punjab police or the border security force, there are many more which could have got through. So I think, and it's my considered submission both to the government of India and the government of Punjab that this is an issue which should not be politicized. The security of Punjab concerns the security of the nation. And therefore, both the government of Punjab and the government of India need to work closely to proscribe this and nip it in the bud.
No, you're saying it should not be politicized, but that's exactly what is happening. There are voices in Delhi and Punjab, both from the BJP and Congress, who are raising questions about the Aam Aadmi Party government, which has just come to power, suggesting almost that these attacks are linked to the fact there is a new government led by a debutant chief minister who may not be as experienced in handling security issues. Do you draw a connection in that manner, or do you believe it's fair to draw a connection in that manner?
Well, Rajdeep, if someone is saying that, it is most unfortunate and it should not be done. However, having said that, the fact that we have a new government, and obviously it's a new political force which has emerged in Punjab, our not so friendly neighbor across the border may be trying to test the red lines of this government. And to that extent, what unfortunately has been happening over the past month or so, ever since this government has come into office, could be really an attempt to test their red lines. But then, if you are going to peg it at their door and say, oh, this is the problem of the Aam Aadmi Party, let's not forget that when Punjab gets imperiled, the entire nation gets consumed. So therefore, this finger pointing does not really help anybody. This is the time when everybody needs to come together, and the siloized approach in our national security calculus needs to be broken. Because if you rewind back, you will find that every major terror attack which has succeeded in India, there was always intelligence. It's just that the intelligence never got shared, primarily because somebody thought it was his turf and decided not to disseminate it. So under these circumstances, I think this is a wake-up call. It's providence that that grenade did not explode and no major damage took place. But we would be absolutely naive and foolish if we do not see it as a clear message from those who want to disturb the peace of Punjab that we are here and we are ready to walk the extra mile in order to carry out our nefarious designs.
Just one final question. Remember, during the Punjab election campaign, Manish Tiwari, former Chief Minister of the Congress, Captain Amrinder Singh, spoke about increased drone attacks from across the border in Pakistan. Intelligence reports suggesting now that ISI has formed a terror group called Lashkar-e-Khalsa. A group called Sikhs for Justice has taken responsibility for the attack, claiming Khalistani links. Do you see a wider, deeper conspiracy here, or is this a one-off?
Well, I am not privy to what intelligence inputs the government of Punjab has, or what intelligence inputs have been passed on by the government of India to the government of Punjab. But, Captain Amrinder Singh is someone who has a very serious scholarly interest in issues of national security. And as Chief Minister of Punjab, he repeatedly kept warning both the central government as well as tightening up the police apparatus in Punjab in order to ensure that the peace and tranquility is maintained. And, we face a constant challenge from across the border. And as they say, eternal vigil is the price of liberty, and eternal vigil, that is the price that you have to pay in Punjab to keep the state peaceful.
Manish Tiwari, appreciate your joining us. Good to see a politician who's not playing politics with national security. That's all too rare in this country. This is an issue where the centre and the state need to work together. Punjab, border state, needs a new form of a federal compact in a way between state and centre when it comes to fighting terror. Let's take a break. On the other side is our good news today story. It comes from Prayagraj. We'll have more on the other side. You're watching the news today. News without the noise.
Make your media plan smarter with India Today Live TV on your connected devices. Amplify your brand with 100 million smart internet viewers. To advertise, mail us at sales@aajtak.com or call 9999892171.
You have the lightning, you have the TikTok music, you have snacks, you have all the things we like. You don't have like 90s era or 80s era. You have the 2020 era, and I think that's good.
I mean, it is a big part of our society today, so why not try to make it more creative? I mean, here you find a place for children. Maybe all children aren't interested in going to a museum of history or art, but this is a place where they can come to like a museum-like space at least and be creative. You can take cool pictures, create cool content for like your Instagram or your Facebook, or if you do TikToks, it's the perfect place to do TikToks.
When it's the world's biggest news story, there's only one gold standard of journalism.
You are watching
Welcome back. Let's bring you some good news today. There's always good news in this wonderful country. Today about a makeshift school in the slums of Prayagraj, once Allahabad. Vivek Dubey, the man who runs the school, provides books, school bags and even takes care of the students' healthcare expenses. He's an inspiration. Here's his story.
This makeshift school in Prayagraj Skidganj area has been fulfilling the dreams of children living in slums. All students come from homes where parents work as daily wage laborers or rag pickers. And they owe their learning to Vivek Dubey, who left his post-graduation course midway after seeing small children working by the roadside.
ये बच्चे बहुत थोड़ा दूर जाकर नहीं पढ़ सकते, कहीं जाकर नहीं पढ़ सकते, इसलिए यह आवश्यक था कि इनके गली में ही स्कूल खोला जाए। तो हर गली में जहाँ जहाँ ये लोग रहते हैं वहाँ पे हम लोगों ने गली स्कूल खोल दिया। मैं विश्वविद्यालय में MSc में था उस समय, और मुझे लगा कि अगर कौन सी पढ़ाई मैं कर रहा हूँ जो इनकी कष्ट को, इनके समस्याओं को, इनकी परेशानियों को मैं नहीं देख पा रहा हूँ, तो मुझे दिखती गई इनकी परेशानियाँ और मैं व्याकुल होता गया। अंततः मैं MSc 3rd सेमेस्टर में इन बच्चों को शिक्षित करने के लिए मेरा सपना था कि मैं प्रोफेसर बनूँ, लेकिन मैंने अपने सपने को छोड़ा।
As many as 200 children are being educated at Dubey School, and the learning is not restricted to only the basics. They are also being taught to recycle waste into useful products.
मेरा नाम सानिया है, मैं पुलिस बनना चाहती हूँ।
आपने क्या बनाया है और किसने बनाया है?
जैविक गैस। इसलिए ताकि मेरी मम्मी परेशान ना हो कि वो चूल्हे में बनाए तो उनके आँख में धुआं लगे।
Sameer, for example, built a cooler for his family, and Sumit made a solar light apparatus so that he could study at all times.
हमने एक कूलर बनाया है जो हमने इस प्रकार से बनाया है। हमारे घरों में पक्की छतें नहीं है, ना ही पंखे फैन है, इसलिए हमने रात में पढ़ाई जब करते हैं तो हमको बहुत गर्मी लगती है, इसलिए हमने एक कूलर खुद का बनाया है।
Dubey also provides books, uniforms, school bags to the kids, even their medical expenses when they fall ill. For Dubey, it's a mission to help children who have nothing but to dream big. With Anand Raj from Prayagraj, Bureau Report, India Today.
Inspirational story there. I want to leave you though tonight with a bit of sad news. The legendary music composer and the man who defined the santoor, Pandit Shiv Kumar Sharma, passed away at the age of 84 today of a cardiac arrest. Tributes poured in from across the country. Remember, Shiv Pandit ji and Pandit Hari Prasad Chaurasia, one on the santoor, the other on the flute. It was a jugalbandi made in heaven. I leave you tonight with the santoor maestro's memorable performances. Thanks for watching. Stay well, stay safe. Good night. Shubh Ratri. Jai Hind. Namaskar. Listen in to the one and only Pandit Shiv Kumar Sharma. Bye for now.
Amphan, Gulabi, Asani. These are not deserts but the names of deadly cyclones. On average, 2 to 3 tropical cyclones make landfall in India each year. But why do we name storms? And how did it start? There's a possibility of having more than one cyclone at a time in a particular geographical location or around the globe. So, to facilitate disaster risk awareness and management, each tropical storm is given a name to avoid confusion. Information has to be passed between scattered stations, coastal bases, and ships at sea. Giving out short, easy to pronounce names is helpful in giving out detailed storm information. When a storm's wind reaches a speed of 62 km per hour or more, it is then classified as a hurricane, cyclone, or typhoon. In the Indian Ocean and South Pacific, tropical cyclones receive names in alphabetical order, and women and men's names are alternated. 6 regional specialized meteorological centers are tasked with giving a title to a cyclone. The India Meteorological Department is responsible for naming the one that forms over the northern Indian Ocean. In the beginning, storms were named arbitrarily. Later, meteorologists decided to name storms from a list for a more organized and efficient system. The list is arranged according to the names given by alphabetically arranged countries. These names are neutral to gender, politics, religious beliefs, and cultures. Once a name is used, it will not be repeated again. The most recent list released in 2020 has 169 names, including 13 names each from 13 countries. Earlier, 8 countries had given 64 names. Names from India that have been used include Gati, which means speed, Megh, which stands for cloud, and Akash, which means sky. Other designations that have been used earlier include Ogni, Helen, and Fani from Bangladesh, and Laila, Nargis, and Bulbul from Pakistan. The most recent one, Asani, was given by Sri Lanka. Asani or Roth in Sinhalese will be the first cyclonic storm of the season. The cyclone that will form after Asani will be called Sitrang, a name given by Thailand. Earlier, World Meteorological Organization had retired Ida from the future list of names as the storm was a destructive and deadly hurricane in the US.
When it's the world's biggest news story, there's only one gold standard of journalism. When it's the world's biggest news story, there's only one gold standard of journalism.
Our philosophy or our fundamentals was a customer-funded business model, meaning that early on, as we kind of had this idea that building digital maps would be something pioneering and unique for the country, there could be infinite applications for this product that we had in mind. We immediately started to look for customers who could benefit from digital maps as a solution. And because it was going to drive value for them, they actually paid us to build out digital maps for their unique kind of use cases and problems. So actually that not just generated business for us, it also funded our products. It's just simply a function of think through what problems people are facing in the world in different areas, and then try to apply the technology that you have deep understanding of towards solving that problem. And that product market fit is basically where monetization, profitability happens, and if you can solve it well. Build it with customers. Build it for customers. Test it very often with them. So definitely don't have it as a shining kind of jewel that you're polishing, in the back of your lab or back of your office. But really, engage with customers. Tell them that, look, I'm planning to build this. Will this solve your problem? Get their requirements. Have them try out, iterate your product or solution towards that. And still, there will be failures that one will have. You will have ideas, you will have visions. It may be that the market is not ready for your solution right now. The market will be ready in a few years. Basically, if your customers love and use your product, I think that's kind of the key insights that you have to drive. You have to actually talk to the customers and figure out whether they are using it, whether they like it, and then whether they're willing to pay for it, and then can you build it cheaper than what they're willing to pay for it.
The South African scientists who identified Omicron late last year have now reported 2 more Omicron subvariants, BA4 and BA5.
In association with Men of Platinum, LIC हर पल आपके साथ।
Mahinda Rajapaksa flees the Sri Lankan Prime Minister's residence with family. Rajapaksa takes refuge at a Sri Lankan Navy base. Angry protesters bring down the statue of DN Rajapaksa as anger spirals out of control. The army is called out, shoot at sight orders issued. More than 40 homes of ruling party leaders set ablaze. Island on fire is our top focus on India First. As of now, there are shoot-at-sight orders issued in Sri Lanka by the Ministry of Defence, giving the army emergency powers to shoot to stop looting, arson and violence. More than 40 homes of ministers, ex-ministers, members of parliament and other political leaders have been set on fire overnight in this violence. But will shoot-at-sight orders bring the situation under control? We will get you the latest from the island nation on fire. I'm Gaurav Sawant. As always, let's get started with the headlines on India First. Supreme Court asks the centre to clear stand on Sedition law by tomorrow. Top court wants to know if the law can be kept in abeyance for pending and future cases. This after the Narendra Modi government said it will re-examine the colonial era law. Khalistan linked to the RPG attack on Punjab Police Intelligence Headquarters emerges. SFJ Chief Gurpatwant Singh Pannu issues an open threat, warning of attacks in Himachal Pradesh next. Some Hindu groups demand Qutub Minar be renamed as Vishnu Stambh. The BJP wants Mughal era names of roads in the capital to be purged. Loudspeaker showdown in Karnataka escalates. The Basavaraj Bommai government sets a 15-day deadline for religious places to comply with the noise limits. Kashmir Files maker Vivek Agnihotri hits back at senior Congress leader Shashi Tharoor for allegedly mocking the genocide of Kashmiri Hindus, reminds him that his late wife Sunanda Pushkar was also a Kashmiri Pandit. Sri Lanka is descending deeper into chaos. The government in the island nation has now issued shoot-at-sight orders to quell protests, violence, arson and looting. Mahendra Rajapaksa and his family were forced to be evacuated by the army in a military helicopter when the outer periphery of the Prime Minister's residence was broken by protesters. The situation remains extremely grim. We bring you our top story from Sri Lanka.
Lanka is in flames. Violent protests rocking the picturesque island nation. Super luxury cars vandalized and burnt in arson attacks. Plush residences of top politicians set on fire in unprecedented display of public fury. The Indian Ocean nation, grappling with its worst ever economic crisis, is now on the brink of a full-blown civil war. Homes of several sitting and former ministers, members of parliament and mayors have been set on fire by protesters, angry over economic hardship, chronic shortage of essential items and runaway inflation. The house of Sri Lanka's former Prime Minister, Mahinda Rajapaksa, who resigned on Monday, was also set ablaze. Protests were staged over acute shortages of fuel and electricity, along with skyrocketing prices of essential commodities. Dramatic images of chopper reportedly evacuating members of ruling party from a stadium surfaced. Former Prime Minister Rajapaksa too left his official residence, Temple Trees, early on Tuesday after military cleared out protesters. The government imposed a nationwide curfew till Wednesday. Anti-government protesters lined up the streets leading to the international airport to block any ministers leaving the country. Speaking to India Today exclusively, former Sri Lankan cabinet minister and cricket captain Arjuna Ranatunga blamed the Rajapaksas.
They allowed them to walk towards them. I think it was a highly planned thing. And I blame the police, I blame the forces. They should have easily stopped this thing. This entire thing was planned by most probably the government, but supported by the police and the forces as well.
At least 7 people, including an MP, have died in the flare-up and hundreds have been injured. With Ruxana Rizvi in Colombo and Ashutosh Mishra in Delhi, Bureau Report, India Today.
So former Sri Lanka minister and cricket captain Arjun Ranatunga, he spoke exclusively to India Today's Ashutosh Mishra on the ongoing crisis. Now, Arjun Ranatunga blames the Rajapaksa government for this, not just the economic crisis, but the situation that's deteriorating with each passing hour in the country. Let's listen in.
What is the situation that you are seeing in Colombo, in the island country?
I think it was a highly unwanted situation created by the Prime Minister who resigned yesterday. These protesters, these peaceful protesters have been protesting for almost 1 month without any violence. I think we all like the way they handle things. And unfortunately, last morning, President has invited some of his party supporters, MPs, ministers, and there were a fairly big crowd came to the temple trees, that is the Prime Minister's office and the home, and they started talking about it, and unfortunately it came to a stage where they were provoked by some of the ministers, even the Prime Minister, and that is where the incident started. These people who were supposed to be after alcohol went towards almost like a kilometer, maybe 1.5 kilometers from the temple trees to the protest area, that is at the golf face, and they started attacking the innocent people, innocent protesters, and they started attacking the ladies, the priests, the people who were innocently protesting. They started attacking. That is where the entire country walked into the roads and started this particular issue.